What if I tell you, a missile hitting somewhere in the Gulf can hit your wallet in America by tomorrow? Not because it travels that far, but because it hits a place the world depends on, the United Arab Emirates. A country known for stability, wealth, and skyline luxury, now standing at the center of a growing storm. Because this isn't just about explosions on the ground, it's about pressure on the system that powers the world. Oil, shipping, trade, air travel, all running through one critical hub. And when that hub is shaken, everything starts to move. Prices, routes, decisions, fear. So here's the real question. How does a strike in the desert echo through American gas stations? How does a conflict thousands of miles away start showing up in your everyday costs? And why does the UAE matter so much that when it's hit, the impact doesn't stay local? To understand that, we have to follow the chain reaction. From missiles to markets, from disruption to dollars, from the Gulf to your daily life. The reality is, the United Arab Emirates is not just a fancy name for a luxury airline. The United Arab Emirates is a federation of 7 emirates and is a center for global trade, energy, logistics, and finance. In the chaos after the 2026 escalation between the United States, Israel, and Iran, the UAE, a country often seen as stable and wealthy, suddenly became a target. Missiles landed, oil infrastructure was threatened, shipping routes were shaken, and within hours, global markets reacted. Oil prices jumped almost instantly, shipping costs rose overnight, and airlines began to panic. And it didn't stop there. The shock quickly spread into the US economy. That's why this isn't just a local story. It turns into a global shockwave, and the United States is standing directly in that shockwave. So here's the real question. Why does damage to a small Gulf country have such a massive impact on the United States? To answer that, we need to connect the dots, from geopolitics to economics, from missiles to markets, and from the desert to your daily life. As a matter of fact, we should understand that US trade with the UAE is already quite substantial. According to the US Trade Representative, the US and UAE did nearly $47.9 billion in trade in 2024, while exports of goods to the UAE were $31.4 billion in 2025, which means this connection is not distant. It is already part of the system that shapes everyday American life. To understand when the Emirates shakes, America feels it, you first have to understand what the Emirates really is in strategic terms. The United Arab Emirates is not just a rich state with skyscrapers, fancy things, and luxury. The UAE is not just a country on the map. It's basically a switchboard. Energy, shipping, aviation, finance, even military access, everything connects here. It is reported that the UAE's non-oil trade hit a record 3 trillion dirhams in 2024, showing how deeply the country sits inside global commerce. The United States is tied into that switchboard. It is one of the United States' most critical strategic partners in the Middle East. According to the US State Department, the US and UAE have deep cooperation in defense and military operations, counterterrorism, trade and investment, energy security, and most importantly, the US has a direct military presence inside the UAE, including the Al Dhafra Air Base, which supports American air operations across the region. And this is where it gets serious. When the Emirates is damaged, America does not just lose a foreign partner. It loses a piece of the system that moves capital, cargo, fuel, and strategic access. This is no longer indirect. It is direct pressure, right on the system the US depends on. So here's the real question. Who gets hurt in the United States? Not just bankers, oil traders, diplomats. American exporters feel it, importers feel it, airlines, ports, energy companies, even tech firms. And eventually, ordinary American consumers get hit through higher costs and slower delivery. But the real story goes even deeper, beyond oil, beyond trade, into the technology that powers the modern world. In January 2026, the UAE joined a US-led AI and semiconductor supply chain program called Factssay, which shows how tightly the two countries are linked in advanced technology and logistics. In March 2025, the UAE committed to a 10-year, $1.4 trillion investment framework in the United States, with money directed toward AI infrastructure, semiconductors, energy, and manufacturing. That means damage to the Emirates does not just hurt a foreign partner. It can disrupt a country that is actively helping finance, build, and connect parts of the American economy. It was reported on April 3, 2026, that the UAE's non-oil private sector was growing at its weakest pace in nearly 4 years because the Middle East conflict hit demand and disrupted supply chains, according to a report. The same report said tourism, retail, and logistics were among the most affected sectors, and that supplier delivery times lengthened after the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. These disruptions start in places like the Strait of Hormuz, Dubai's ports, Abu Dhabi's air hubs, and the flight corridors that connect the UAE to the US. The US Energy Information Administration says an average of 20 million barrels per day moved through the Strait of Hormuz in 2024, equal to about 20% of global petroleum liquids consumption. EIA also says the United States imported about 0.4 million barrels per day of crude oil and condensate from Persian Gulf countries through the strait in the first half of 2025. That is why people who think this is just a Gulf problem are missing the point. If the strait is threatened, if global energy markets react, US fuel prices and inflation expectations can react too. That means the UAE is not only a business bridge, it is also a strategic bridge for US operations. So how does damage in the United Arab Emirates actually hurt the United States? It doesn't hit all at once. It comes in waves. Tankers slow down. Insurance gets expensive. Traders start to panic. It is generally assumed that everything begins with energy. The UAE sits next to the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical arteries of the global economy. Now here's the key point. Even if oil is not physically blocked, fear alone moves markets. The moment conflict threatened the UAE or nearby waters, tankers hesitated. Insurance costs surged, traders panicked, and global oil prices spiked. That spike didn't stay in the Gulf. It traveled directly into the United States through higher fuel prices, increased production costs, rising inflation. This is not just a scenario. It is how global energy markets function. The second wave hit global trade. The UAE is one of the world's most important logistics and re-export hubs, connecting Asia, Europe, and Africa. When instability struck, shipping slowed down. Freight costs increased, insurance premiums surged. According to reports, disruptions around the Strait of Hormuz had already lengthened delivery times and strained logistics networks. For the United States, this meant delayed imports, higher costs for goods, pressure on businesses and supply chains. So even though the war was far away, its effects showed up in American warehouses, ports, and prices. The third wave is less obvious, but equally powerful. The UAE is a global aviation hub, and Emirates Airline is one of the largest international carriers connecting the US to the world. According to Emirates, 96 weekly passenger flights operate between Dubai and the United States. Direct routes connect major cities like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Boston, Dallas, Houston, Miami, San Francisco, Seattle, and Washington, D.C. Cargo operations link U.S. cities including Chicago, Columbus, Houston, Los Angeles, and Miami. And here's the scale. Nearly 3.2 million passengers traveled on U.S. routes in a single year. Critical cargo includes pharmaceuticals, medical supplies, and energy equipment. Now imagine disruption in the UAE, and eventually, flights get rerouted or reduced, cargo slows down, costs increase. This directly affected U.S. travel demand, airline operations, medical and industrial supply chains. Thus, a strike in the Gulf can quietly disrupt American mobility and commerce. The fourth wave is strategic, and this is where it becomes serious. The UAE is not just an economic partner, it is a security pillar for the United States. It hosts key U.S. military infrastructure, including Al Dhafra Air Base and Jebel Ali Port. When these locations were threatened, the US deployed more resources, military risk increased, strategic focus shifted to crisis management. In simple terms, damage in the UAE forced the United States to spend more militarily, politically, and strategically just to maintain stability. Now this was where the story became even more critical, because the danger was not just that the UAE could be hit, the real danger was what got hit there. In a place as connected as the Emirates, the targets were rarely random. They were carefully chosen pressure points of modern life: ports, water infrastructure, and oil and petrochemical facilities. Across multiple regional security assessments during the 2026 Iran-Israel conflict, analysts consistently noted a clear pattern. It focused on commercial hubs, transport routes, and critical infrastructure. Start with ports and airports. They are not just cargo terminals and runways. They are the gateways that kept the UAE connected to Asia, Europe, Africa, and the United States. And when the UAE came under attack, those gateways became vulnerable. A slowed port meant delayed goods. A risky airport meant rerouted flights, disrupted cargo, and higher costs. And once commercial hubs felt unsafe, investors pulled back fast. That is why damage in the UAE mattered to America, because US trade, aviation, and supply chains were tied into it. When the UAE was hit, the shock did not stay there. It moved straight into the American economy. Then there is water, the most overlooked risk, yet one of the most dangerous. In the Gulf, water does not come from rivers, it comes from the sea. Countries like the UAE rely heavily on desalination, turning seawater into drinking water. But there is a catch. This process needs a huge amount of energy, so the system is fragile. That meant if energy systems were disrupted, water supply could be hit almost immediately. Because when water infrastructure was threatened, it was not just a local problem. It meant instability in a country that the US was economically and strategically tied to. No power meant no water. No water meant a crisis. And when the UAE was hit, the shock could travel straight into American interests. So any attacks here were not just economic. They could become existential infrastructure threats. Then comes energy, the most powerful pressure point of all. According to Reuters, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed strikes on petrochemical facilities in the UAE and neighboring states. It warned of escalation against US economic interests. This reveals the strategy clearly. Target energy to trigger global shock to pressure the United States. As the UAE sits near the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical oil routes in the world. When there is even a threat in this region, markets react immediately. Prices rise, shipping becomes uncertain, confidence drops. And that impact didn't not stay in the Gulf. It reached the United States through higher fuel costs, disrupted supply chains, and economic pressure. But then, the line was crossed even further. Because for the first time, it wasn't just nearby infrastructure, it was American property itself. The United States Consulate General Dubai was hit by an Iranian drone strike. The impact caused a fire, visible damage, and immediate alarm. This wasn't a speculation. This wasn't an indirect fallout. It was a direct strike on a US diplomatic site inside the United Arab Emirates. Although the UAE says it has intercepted over 90% of incoming missiles and drones from Iran, but that doesn't mean it hasn't taken heavy hits. In fact, the UAE has been the hardest hit by Iran's retaliation. Around 3,000 projectiles, missiles, and drones have been launched toward Gulf countries, and more than half of them have targeted the UAE. And then comes the part that most people miss. The strategy behind the strikes. Why Iran targeted systems, not just soldiers. From Iran's perspective, this is not random, it is calculated. This is game theory in action. If you cannot directly overpower your opponent, you increase the cost for them instead. Iran is not trying to defeat the United States in a direct confrontation. That would be irrational. Instead, it is playing a different game. Raise the cost, increase the risk, destabilize the system. This is an asymmetric strategy. Instead of matching power, it targets vulnerabilities. Instead of winning battles, and it shifts incentives. The message is clear. If you pressure us, we can pressure the system you depend on. That is why the targets are not just military. They are economic, logistical, and psychological. Because global stability is built on confidence, and once confidence breaks, markets react faster than missiles. And when you connect all these layers together, a clear pattern emerges. This is why the damage to the Emirates hurts the USA, because globalization is not just a slogan anymore, it is a wiring diagram. One shock in the Gulf can move upward into energy prices, sideways into shipping and aviation, forward into factory delays and consumer prices, and it can move inward into US strategy, because the UAE sits at the intersection of trade, technology, and security. So if someone asks, why should Americans care about damage in the Emirates? The answer is simple. Not because America is weak, but because the world is connected. This is why the story is bigger than missiles and maps. Because in today's world, you don't need to attack America directly to hurt it. You just need to hit the systems it depends on. And the UAE is one of the most critical systems of them all.
It's time for Factssay Confidence Score.
If this helped you see the bigger picture, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still thinks this is just a Gulf problem. Because in today's world, the shock never stays local for long. It travels. And when the Emirates gets hit, America can feel the aftershock. Because in today's world, no war is truly distant anymore.